All right, Chapter 2, A Black Cross in the Sky. The long, low-slung punga sat rigid on the water. Neither Tomas's leaning on it nor the fisherman's energetic movements could rock the sturdy boat. A brown pelican swam up to Ramon and eyed him hopefully, for he knew the generosity of this fisherman well. "No food today, Boca Grande," Ramon said, showing the bird an empty hand. "Want to know something?" Tomas was still hanging onto the punga, trying to start a political conversation and wondering how to begin. "Yes," answered Ramon. "Well," he could think of nothing political, and so he blurted out what he thought was really important. "Boca Grande has chicks," he said. "How do you know that?" "Its head has white feathers, not yellow or brown like most of the pelicans. The white head and the black streaks down the back of the neck say, 'I am feeding chicks.'" "Where did you learn that?" "I watched the pelicans at their roost," Tomas said. "The ones that looked like Boca Grande were feeding chicks. The yellow and brown-headed ones were not. The science teacher said I am right." "I've always wondered why pelicans came in 3 colors," said Miguel, looking at the chunky-bodied bird with new interest. Another pelican dropped headfirst into the water from 30 feet up and surfaced and swallowed a fish. "A yellowhead, Tomas. That one has no chicks, but it is an adult. The brown-headed ones are yearlings." Ramon was impressed with Tomas's knowledge. The boy really did like to learn. Tomas shoved the punga into deep water so that Miguel could drop the outboard motor, an Evinrude 55 that was Ramon's pride and for which he had saved for 7 years. "Did you say you are not going to fish the shallows today, Grandpapa?" Tomas asked, still holding on to the punga. "That's right," he answered. "We are going out to the deep basin of Carmen Island. We haven't caught much in the shallows for a long time." "Why is that? Are there too many fishermen?" Tomas was thinking of the armada of sport fishing boats that roared by every morning to fish the waters of Coronados Island. These men and women rarely took sharks, but Tomas knew they caught the fish that the killer sharks fed upon. "Mostly it's the Japanese fish factory boats," said Miguel. Every fisherman in Laredo had despaired when the government had permitted the huge foreign factory boats to come into the Sea of Cortez several years ago. Like huge vacuum cleaners, the boats sucked up every living thing in their paths: game fish, sharks, squid, shrimp, even snails, shellfish, and sea urchins. They were culled and the fish canned or frozen aboard ship and taken to Japan for marketing. "Why do they affect us?" Tomas asked. "The factory ships are far out in the sea. Our fish stay in our waters." "That is so," Miguel said, tinkering with the motor. "But the factory ships kill all the baby fish. They kill baby sharks and squid and even baby coral and sponges. There are practically no little ones to grow up and replace the big ones we take. Our catch has been dropping off steadily since the factory boats came in." "But the sea is endless, Miguel. You said so." "Apparently it is not," he replied, checking the gas. "Apparently it is not." "Why does our government let these boats suck up our fish?" Tomas asked, pleased to be at last talking politics. "Money," Miguel said. "The Japanese pay the oficiales huge sums of money." But they are our fish." Thomas was truly upset. "What can we do?" shrugged Miguel, settling himself beside the Evinrude. "Have another revolution? We've had 2 already. The first one to free us from Spain, and the second one to free us from the rich landlords. Did they help?" Tomas thought about that. According to his social studies book, the Revolution of 1910 and the new Constitution of 1917 had given the people many rights, as well as some needed land reforms. It was a good constitution, but when Tomas looked around Laredo, he saw that the poor were still poor and the rich were growing ever richer. Miguel pulled the starter cord. The motor hummed and Tomas let go of the boat. "What should I do if the oficiales arrive?" he shouted as the boat backed away. "Laugh for them," said Ramon. "Bribe them," said Miguel. "That's how the system works." "We don't have any money." "Then it's too bad for us," said Miguel bitterly. Tomas watched the blue and white punga swing in an arc and speed toward the open sea. As it rounded the southern end of the cove, a dark body with a strange head shaped like an enormous mallet passed under the Ponga on its way to the rock reef. The reef was the end of a dike of volcano lava that began high up on the mountain, ran down behind the Palapa, and jutted out 300 feet into the sea. It formed the north end of the cove where the Torreses camped. Tomas stood alone, feeling the chill of awareness, and he did not like it. He did not like to know that the Japanese factory boats were sucking up his family's living. He did not like to know that the oficiales were coming to the island, probably to bring bad news. He whistled to clear his head, but the problems would not go away. Ramon and Miguel had been bringing home less fish for the market. Grandmother Dolores was not buying fresh bakery bread and sugar cookies anymore, not even canned refried beans. Tomas squeezed his eyes closed and called upon his imagination for help. He saw the annual Christmas pageant at the Lady of Laredo Mission. In the play, the forces of good, the warriors, hermits, nuns, and angels, battled the forces of evil, the devils and bulls. After a long struggle, good triumphed. And it does every year, Tomas said aloud to the sea, feeling better. Everything is going to be sunshine. He turned a cartwheel and skipped a stone across the still water. The rising sun had changed the sky-reflecting sea from night black to dawn gold. As the water changed, the Coronados volcano shifted from gray to pink, and the distant mountains turned hot violet red. The day was going to be very warm. Tomas plunked himself down in the chair his father had made long ago out of driftwood and turned his thoughts from politics to the volcano. Now, how would a Spanish galleon get up there in the first place, he asked himself. Miguel must be wrong. The ship must be from a far earlier time, when the volcano was shorter and young like a baby. The ship docked on it and rose with the mountain into the sky. He squinted and saw the mast again, but it was not as bright a gold as Miguel claimed it to be. That proves it is very ancient, he reasoned. It must be the boat Quetzalcoatl escaped in when the evil Tezcatlipoca tricked him into sinning and then forced him to flee. A verdin, a little songbird, flew past Tomas, carrying a strand of grass for one of the many ball-shaped nests in which he roosted out of the hot blazing sun of summer and was protected from the torrential tropical rain of winter. Tomas called these nests bird palapas, and usually followed the little verdins to see how they wove their hollow balls, but not today. The ship was the quest he had chosen. It has to be Quetzalcoatl's ship, he concluded, and jumped to his feet, and now to find it. Tomas put on the Nike shoes his mother had given him for his 14th birthday. He was proud of them, for they were very fashionable. They had Velcro straps instead of the laces and were the colors of Mexico's flag, red, white, and green. He rolled down his trouser legs so the thorn bushes would not scratch him and filled his canteen with drinking water from the big plastic drum. Since there was no fresh water on Coronados except in one pool after a hard rain, the Torreses brought their water to the island. Tomas screwed on the canteen lid, stuffed the leftover cooked fish into his pocket, and started off. The trail began in an arroyo, a dry stream bed that came down the volcano's slope. Even at its beginning, the path was a fortress. The stiff, spiny limbs of the mesquite and the elastic twigs of the elephant trees were entwined like a bale of barbed wire. When he tried to progress, thorns tore his clothing and leathery limbs bounced him backward. He was forced to cut his way with his knife. Farther along, huge strands of old man's beard and spiny cholla cacti pushed him back. He circled them, wedged between boulders, and finally scrambled up out of the arroyo onto a barren plateau of rocks and scattered plants. Here the trail ended, and Tomas sat down to rest and search for a route up the barren cone. His eyes wandered across the vast panorama before him. Across the jade-green sea stood the Baja California mountains. In the full light of the sun, they were not cardboard cutouts, but massive structures, deeply eroded and partially forested with huge cardon cacti 40 feet high. In their arroyos grew the graceful thatch palm of the Palapas, the Washington palm. They are not charming mountains. No lakes or rivers glitter on their landscape. They are rough, cruel mountains, dry and hostile. They drive off intruders. The conquistadors, early monks, and padres deserted them soon after finding them. U.S. generals and developers came, saw, and returned to their sweeter homelands. The Baja California mountains are raw and hot and strong, and Tomas loved them. About 3 million years ago, this mountain range created the Sea of Cortez when it broke off from the mainland of Mexico and drifted into the Pacific Ocean on one of the Earth's sliding crusts. The range is Baja Mexico. 2 million years later, hot magma spewed up from the seafloor and volcanic islands appeared. One of these, and to Tomas the most beautiful of all the desert islands near Laredo, was Coronados. Looking down through eagle eyes, one would see that Coronados Island is shaped like a turtle. It rises almost 1,000 feet above the surface of the sea. Its sloping shoulders are sparsely thicketed, its summit practically barren of life, but underwater the rocks of Coronados are an Eden. An upwelling of cold, nutrient-rich waters feeds reef fishes and sea creatures of a million designs and colors. The reefs were Tomas's world. He dived to them whenever he could. Along the reefs he did not have to dream. Nature's incredible living dreams swam and crept all around him. Now, high above the reefs, Tomas stared down on the cool green of the Sea of Cortez and wished he were in it. He was hot, rapidly losing interest in the ship and about to turn back. A fishing boat appeared in the sky. He blinked. It soared above the water as thin and vulnerable as a dragonfly, then shimmered and vanished. Tomas rubbed his eyes. "Mirage," he said. The boat reappeared. "Maybe that's how the ship got to the top of the volcano," he mused. "It floated up in a mirage and never came down. There has to be some good reason." Inspired by his thought, he began climbing. Above him, the volcano warped and bent in the air ripples created by the 90-degree heat, and again his resolve faded. "But I can't go back," he thought. "If Miguel is right and the ship is gold, Grandpapa will not have to worry about the factory boats or the oficiales ever again." He put one foot on an enormous boulder, then the other, balanced, scrambled to the top of the rock slide, and rested. A gnatcatcher, a pretty little island bird, darted over his head and alighted on a spiny twig. It sang, then flew up the mountain. "The bird is showing me the way," he thought, and followed it over an avalanche of rocks to a steep wall. Fluttering on the wing, the gnatcatcher darted here and there frantically, then flew down the mountain. "A warning," Tomas said to himself. "Now the bird is telling me to go back." He listened, expecting to hear Tezcatlipoca roar. Heat waves shimmered off the hot rocks. He heard a scream. Clutching his heart, Tomas looked up. Aguila, the osprey, was overhead, calling to his mate as he carried a snake-like needlefish toward his island nest. Tomas laughed at himself. He knew that call well, but here on the side of the barren volcano, searching for a ship of gold, the sea eagle had sounded like a demon. Tomas joked to himself and inched up a hot wall until he came out on a plateau of broken rocks and spiny grasses. Sitting down, he opened his canteen and drank. The cove below was cool, blue-green jewel, and he took in its freshness with his eyes, then considered the volcano again. From where he sat, he could see no obvious route up the cone, so he simply got to his feet and climbed. Up, he said to himself, is a route itself. A rock slipped under his foot. He flattened against the boulder. The rock plunged down the mountain, hit, bounced, and fell on. It set other rocks crashing and rolling, splintering and avalanching. They piled onto the spot where he had just sipped his water. There, roar and dust settled into silence. Fear tingled through Tomas's veins. He knew he should go back. Grandpapa was right. The volcano was too dangerous to climb. But I must find the ship of gold, he resolved, and scrambled on and up. A boulder wobbled under his feet. Quickly he jumped to another, then another. Like a fly, he walked up the hot incline, climbing on, not daring to look down. Lizards ran out of their dens, crossed in front of his face, and disappeared into the cracks. Finally, he went over a wall and clambered onto a ledge. He gasped. A forum of demons was staring at him, their shoulders hunched up over their naked heads, their claws scratching the rocks. Tezcatlipoca's, what do you want? He whispered hoarsely. The circle of devils had red-rimmed eyes set in the skin-covered skulls. One walked toward him. A ruff of feathers around its neck lifted and fell back. Slowly it unfolded black wings until they expanded 6 feet from tip to tip. The hot rising air lifted them, and the creature soared upward and backward. Another floated off in this manner, then all of them. Vultures, Thomas said with relief, and climbed on. After a long scramble, he sighted the rim of the crater, and using hands and feet, scaled a gritty wall, reached another plateau, and rested. A black shadow crossed his hand, and he looked up to see a vulture attacking. The hooked beak opened, and partially digested carrion spewed out. Foul-smelling, it splattered on the rocks. Thomas almost threw up. Tezcatlipoca is defending the mountain with vultures, he thought. Grandpapa is right. I'm going back. Tomas turned to go down. In looking for a place to set his foot, he saw 2 large speckled eggs lying on the bare ground. A nest, he said aloud. A turkey vulture's nest. The bird is defending it. It is not sent by Tezcatlipoca. Tomas laughed and wiped his sweaty head. On I go, he said, and climbed. On the next plateau, he spotted a chimney-like groove that led to the top, and set out for that. The vultures dived at him again and again, but now he could enjoy them. They were not devils, but the old friends he saw every day circling the island. They were simply defending their nests and eggs. At the chimney, he placed his hands and feet against the walls and moved cautiously, not daring to look down, moved up and up until, perspiring and tired, he finally made the top. He crawled on hands and knees to the edge of the sun-blackened crater and looked down. "There's no ship!" he cried. "There's no ship!" After a long time he rocked to his heels, opened his canteen and took a drink. "I should never have come," Tomas said aloud. "Miguel was right." Tomas wiped his mouth and pushed back his sweaty hair. "But I saw the mast. I know I did. I saw the sails. I saw the lines and rigging." He kicked the rocks to find it. "It must be buried," he reasoned, and bracing himself against a boulder, avalanched the stones with his feet. They rolled, bounced, and cracked into dust deep in the crater. Still he found no ship. Getting to his knees, he dug with his hands. Stone smoke burned his nose, and his eyes watered. An hour passed. Finally Tomas rolled to his back and, disillusioned, looked up at the blue, blue sky for comfort. A solitary frigate bird soared above him like a black cross. To Tomas, the lonely symbol spoke of dark things to come. What does it mean? He asked himself. An hour later he slowly picked his way down the mountain.